Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we're going to be doing a quick video here talking about some signings from the past couple of days, a small trade, and some trade rumors involving a couple of players who I could see be dealt at the trade deadline. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Talk channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're able to without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. And don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. So let's go on discussing this video. Now we're going to start today's video off by discussing some signings from our past couple of days. A couple of interesting ones, most of them from PTOs that turned into contracts. I'm interested to note there. So we'll start here with the Calgary Flames. Tyson Barrie, who went to Flames training camp on a PTO, has since signed a one-year contract with the AV of $1.25 million. That's not too bad in my opinion for Barrie. He's coming off a bad season in Nashville. He'll get time on the power play unit. He'll get top 4 minutes in Calgary. And I think at the deadline, with the Flames most likely being out of the playoff spot in my opinion, he could be a trade chip there for the Flames. Put 15 points last year in 41 games with Nashville. So didn't really work out overly well. He has a chance here to sort of re-gauge himself and hopefully have a better shot at getting a more lucrative contract next year. But this is a pretty good deal in my opinion for Barrie, who took a while to sign. So interesting note there. Tanner Pearson, who went to training camp with the Vegas Golden Knights on a PTO, has signed a one-year league minimum deal to remain with Vegas. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Golden Knights. Pearson last year had 5 goals and 13 points in 54 games with the Montreal Canadiens. Looks like a decent player. Could be a solid fourth liner. Maybe be a 13th, 14th forward for the Golden Knights. So that's a pretty good pickup there in my opinion for Vegas to get him signed. Then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes sign Ron Brindamore's son, Skylar Brindamore, to a one-year deal with AV league minimum. That's pretty good. So Skylar's going to be under contract for the same team his dad coaches. Interesting note there. Last year played in Charlotte with the AHL, putting up 3 goals and 8 points in 54 games. I think eventually could be a solid, maybe third line forward eventually. So probably not going to make the NHL team at this point in time, but still it's a pretty good pickup there for the Hurricanes to sign Brindamore. Then we saw the Columbus Blue Jackets sign Kevin Labanc. Labanc went to training camp with the New Jersey Devils on a PTO, but has wound up signing with the Blue Jackets. That's going to be a really good pickup there for the Jackets, who know they needed some more forward help. Could definitely use some more forward bodies, and getting Labanc's pretty good. Last year coming off a bad season where he had 2 goals and 9 points in 46 games with the Sharks. Not overly a great season there, but he was lighting it up in the preseason with the Devils, and hopefully he can carve himself out a top 9 role with the Jackets. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And finally, the last signing here was a massive one. The last RFA has officially gone down. We talked about this a couple of videos ago about how Swayman and the Bruins were on like a stalemate. It sounded like Swayman wanted between $8.5 and $9 million. It sounded like the Bruins were trying to keep him under $8 million. Well, they've come to a compromise and they signed him to an 8-year extension with an AV of $8.25 million. This is a pretty good deal in my opinion for Swayman. Puts him in the upper echelon of goaltending contracts, so pretty good. It's not the $9 million he wanted, but I think this is a pretty good deal for Swayman. Last year put up 44 games of NHL action, putting up a 2.53 GAA and 916 save percentage, so he looked like a really fantastic goaltender. Swayman is probably one of the top 10 goaltenders in the league, but he's being paid as one of the top 5 in the NHL, so pretty good stuff there for Swayman. I think he's eventually going to earn this contract, and hopefully he does really well this year. But he didn't go to training camp this year due to the stalemate with his contract, so he might be a little bit rusty over the first few games for the Bruins, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But at least Swayman's going to be under contract and play this year for the Boston Bruins. Interesting note there. Then we got a couple of injury updates to talk about. Nothing too substantial here, but we did get a couple more injury updates. Macklin Celebrini was injured in a preseason game. He's day-to-day right now. Hopefully he should be ready to start the season for the San Jose Sharks. Tim Stutzle, Thomas Chabot, Brady Tkachuk all suffered injuries in a preseason game, but they should be back in the not-too-distant future. P.S. Suter got injured, but he should be back in the not-too-distant future, as should David Gustafsson in Winnipeg. Dmitry Voronkov left a preseason game due to an injury, but I think he should be all right for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Nicholas Aube-Kubel was injured in the first regular season game of the season for the Buffalo Sabres as a lower body injury. Should be back in the not-too-distant future, but did miss the second game of that global series. Interesting note there, but definitely some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Going over to a quick trade that happened earlier today between the Vancouver Canucks and the Colorado Avalanche. The trade is as follows. The Vancouver Canucks acquired Erik Brannstrom from the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for Tucker Poolman and a 2025 4th round pick. Poolman, I think, had a little bit of his contract retained. I think it was 30% of his contract, so they did retain a little bit of his contract. So that was an interesting move there for the Avalanche and the Canucks. For the Canucks, they get a solid, movable third pair of defensemen who can play really well as like a third pair guy. Brannstrom's really mobile. They placed him on waivers. He could start in the minors, so it'll be interesting to note there, but they at least got another solid defenseman. For the Avalanche, they're now able to go over the cap with the LTIR space. Also got a 4th round pick for taking that on. So it was an interesting trade there for both sides, but the Canucks got some more cap flexibility out of LTIR space and another solid puck moving defenseman on the blue line that they could use. Well, the Avalanche are able to go into LTIR space now, and they also get a 2025 4th round pick as well. So interesting move there from both sides. So that was an interesting trade that happened earlier today. Going over to what happened in the first 2 regular season games of the NHL season. Now, as the season starts, we will be recapping some of these games as some of these videos. But today we're just going to be looking at what happened in the first 2 games over in the Global Series, which did count as the regular season games. So first we saw the New Jersey Devils storm out to an early lead. They were up, I think, 3-0 at one point. It was 3-1, then Buffalo made it, and then they scored an empty netter to make it 4-1. So it was a really good first game there from the New Jersey Devils. Markstrom was outstanding, and all the new additions really helped the New Jersey Devils. I mean, first goal of the campaign was from Stefan Noesen, who signed a new deal in Jersey this past year. Then this goal from Kovacevic from the Local Credit Sportsnet, but Kovacevic had a really good shot here to help the Devils make a 2-0 lead. Then Hischier made 3-0. Cotter was the one who had the empty netter, so they had a lot of really good contributions from the new guys. Cotter, Kovacevic both had a goal and an assist, both their first with the Devils. Bastian had 2 assists, and then Noesen, his first since signing in New Jersey, and Hischier both also scored, with Markstrom stopping 30 or 31 shots. While for the Sabres, Power was a lone goal scorer for the Sabres in the loss, so Devils start out 1-0, and then they would top that by going up to 2-0 the day after, as they would win 3-1 over the Buffalo Sabres. Sabres actually opened the scoring, but then they scored 3 straight goals, 1 from Seamus Casey, his first in the NHL, 1 from Paul Cotter, and then 1 from Timo Meier, as they continue to show the NHL that they are back and looking really good. Casey, like we said, his first NHL goal. Cotter scored second in as many games. Meier also scored. There were the 3 goal scorers. Hughes had 2 assists for the Devils, and Allen stopped 17 of 18 shots in the win, while Tage Thompson was the lone goal scorer for Buffalo. So Sabres start 0-2-0. Devils start 2-0. That's pretty good news there for the Devils, and the season's now officially started. They'll get started in North America on Tuesday, so we'll have to wait to see a little bit of time, but should get underway in not just the future. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now, these aren't necessarily trade rumors, but these are 7 players I personally see as potentially being moved to the deadline who do still have term on their contracts. So we're going to start here with the most likely, in my opinion, guy to get moved, and that's Calgary Flames defenseman Rasmus Andersson. Andersson, who's a right shot defenseman, plays top 4, top pair minutes, has this year and next year left on his contract at $4.5 million cap hit. The Flames are deep in a rebuild, most likely going to miss the playoffs this year, so there's a very likely chance they're sellers at the deadline, and I think Andersson's a very likely candidate to get moved. It's a pretty good player in my opinion. I think the Flames could get like a 1st round pick, really good prospect, maybe something else in return for him if they were to move him this year, and I think the return that they could get for him with still a year left on his contract would be huge. So I think there's a very likely chance we could see Rasmus Andersson be moved at this year's trade deadline. Going over to the San Jose Sharks, one guy who I think has term, who is another guy who I think could be moved, is Mario Ferraro. There was a lot of talk about him last year. He has this year plus next year left at a $3.25 million cap hit. He's not as offensively gifted as Andersson, and he's not as elite as Andersson, but he's still a solid second pair defenseman, can play defensive minutes. He's also on the younger side of things too, so that could really help drive up his value. If he has a solid start to the season for the Sharks, I think there would be a lot of interest in him. There was some talk about maybe Carolina or Toronto having interest last year. I wonder if that continues on to this year, but it'll be interesting to see. But I think Ferraro is another guy who we're going to have to watch out for at the trade deadline as a potential trade candidate. Going over to the Anaheim Ducks, another team who I don't think is going to be doing overly good this year, who I think could wind up making some moves at the deadline. A guy who I think could be moved is Trevor Zegras. Now, he's not like the other 2. He's a year away from being an RFA, so he's got this year plus next year left, and then he's an RFA. He's a really good puck-moving top 6 forward, but it just doesn't seem like him and the Ducks fit very well, so I think there's still a very likely chance he gets moved at some point. Now, where he could go, I'm not exactly sure. I've heard New York, I've heard Montreal, I've heard some other teams. Still be interesting to see, but if the Ducks were to move him, it would have to be for a really big ask, but I think with Zegras and his contract where it is right now, I think there's a very likely chance he could get moved at this year's deadline if there was a good enough offer, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to Philadelphia Flyers, a player I could see them moving in season would be Joel Farabee. Now, he has, I think, 3 or 4 years left on his contract at a $5.5 million cap hit, so he's still going to have, I think, 2.5 or 3.5 years left on his contract at the trade deadline. There's been a lot of talk this offseason about Farabee potentially being moved. He's a really good goal scorer, can put up 25 to 30 goals. I think a lot of teams, especially contenders, could use that in their top 6, top 9. So I think there's a very likely chance we could see Farabee be moved at this year's trade deadline, and I think there could be some interesting teams who could try and acquire him, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Now, these next 3 are a little bit more out there, but these are also guys who are on longer term deals, so I think could wind up being moved at the deadline. deadline. One is Colin Parayko in St. Louis. He's got, I think, 6 or 7 years left. At $6.5 million cap hit. He's a really good top 4 right shot defenseman. At the deadline, we'll have, I think, 5.5 years left, if I'm correct, on his contract. So he would still be signed for a long period of time. Any team who's looking for a top 4 mobile defenseman who's on the bigger side of things and can put up points occasionally could be looking for a guy like Parayko. We know the big blue lines lead to really good chances of winning a cup. So I think there could be a lot of teams interested. I don't think St. Louis is going to make the playoffs this year. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if we saw this Blues team wind up dealing him at some point. On top of him, I could see the Pittsburgh Penguins move Bryan Rust. We know the Penguins are a team who's on the fringe right now. I see him just missing on the playoff spot, and would not surprise me if they start moving off some pieces at this year's trade deadline. Rust is a guy who I think makes a lot of sense. I think he's got 3 or 4 years left on his deal at just over $4 million. I think it goes between $4 and $4.5 million. So he's got some interesting term left on his contract too, but he's a guy who is a really good veteran presence, could definitely help a lot of younger teams, fits really well in a top 6. I know he's played a lot of time with Crosby, and I wouldn't be overly surprised if he stayed, but I think Rust could be another trade chip there for the Penguins if they find themselves on the outside looking in. So I would definitely consider Rust as a potential option there for the Penguins to move at the deadline. And if the Tampa Bay Lightning, like I predict, are going to miss the playoffs this year and could be out the deadline, I could see a guy like Brendan Hagel be out the deadline. I think this is one that's the most out there and the most, I think, unlikely to happen. But Hagel's a really good top 6 forward. He can play top 6 minutes. He's worked really well over the past couple of years in Tampa. I think a lot of teams would love to have a guy like Hagel. And if it could boost the Bolts draft capital and prospect pool a little bit, I think they could do that. And Hagel, I also think, doesn't have any sort of trade protection on his contract like some of the other guys do. So it would be easier to move Hagel than it would be some other guys. And I think he's still got 7 years left at a $6.5 million cap hit, which I think is reasonable for what he puts up. So in my opinion, those are 7 players I think could wind up being moved at this year's trade deadline who do still have some term in their contract, including Brandon Hagel, Colin Parayko, Bryan Rust, Mario Ferraro, Rasmus Andersson, Trevor Zegras, and Yoel Farabee. I think all those guys are names we're going to have to watch out for at this year's trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all we're talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about all this? Do you think any of those 7 players could be dealt at this year's trade deadline? Which one do you think is the most likely? Which one do you think is the least likely? And which one do you think is the most out there, in my opinion? Definitely left your guys' thoughts on all of that. Plus, what do you think about the signings, injuries, and trade from over the past couple of days? Definitely left your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Until I like this video, if you'd like to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support when with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't leave a comment down in the comment section below so I can also discuss today's video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So remember to check that out. I'll leave a link down in the description below. And come to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.